We're excited to have you join us for the Come Follow Me 2021 podcast and study of the Doctrine and Covenants, hosted by Rod Meldrum and Jonathan Neville, and presented by Gospel Doctrine Answers. In today's podcast, we will study Doctrine and Covenants 18 through 19. The worth of souls is great.
Welcome, everybody, to our podcast. I have with me, transported back from many years ago. No, just kidding. But he's actually dressed up. This is a friend of mine by the name of Kent Pickering. Kent is all ready to talk about an individual that we're going to be talking about here in section 19 of the Doctrine and Covenants, which is all about this person by the name of Martin Harris. So, Kent, why are you dressed like this today?
Okay. I did attend some of the Firm Foundation conferences, and there wasn't much of Martin Harris, so I got with Rod and agreed to kind of fill in what I felt was missing. But I'm a direct descendant of Martin Harris, but I'm very unique. He has many descendants in the church, but I descend from Martin and Lucy.
Do you want me to get this done?
That's the Lucy. That's a picture painted by a friend of mine who worked on the mural on the Rome Temple in the visitor center. Uh-huh. And
do we know what she looked like?
No,
I mean, actually,
other than felt she had red hair. She would ask me questions. I'd say this. And she'd email me, and she was very brave. So
we don't know really for sure what she looked like, but we do know she had red hair, and she was.
I believe so. I'm not sure.
Lady, apparently, so
it's kind of a little bit following the Martin Harris pageant and Brett James, but
okay.
That I'm not sure it's Martin, but we think it is. Our family's not sure where the picture even came from. But
old daguerreotype,
daguerreotype, and here is a picture of Martin Harris that was just been in the public domain a couple of years. A friend of mine, John Hadjishek, he collects Mormon artifacts. I talked him into releasing it, but he's got his name on it to make so people know that he owns the original. Okay, and here's Caroline Young. She is the daughter of Brigham Young's older brother, John. And so there was a family intermarriage. I think that's where I get my craziness from. My mother always told me that. But genealogy, how this works. My great-grandfather, I don't have a picture, Allen Martin Harris, he was the grandson of Martin Harris and Lucy, and he married the daughter of Martin Harris and Caroline. So it's an intermarriage of half brother, half sister, once removed. I think how you would state it genealogically. it causes all kinds of discussions in our family.
Yes, indeed. Well, wonderful. Well, I tell you, a lot of people have enjoyed some of your other presentations that you've done for the Firm Foundation Expo and the conferences and things. So if you'd like to have more in-depth information beyond what we're going to talk about here today, you can see that on the Book of Mormon Evidence Streaming's website and watch some of the full hour and a half long episodes, I think.
Yeah, I sometimes get long-winded, so I'm glad it's people that have interest that start watching it. So
well, it's interesting to me also because I guess you're going to be coming up in the next conference coming up in April. You have a third one that you're working on. Is that
yes?
I understand.
And a lot of the information in that third presentation we'll discuss today, but so I'm kind of giving away my thunder.
So this is a little bit of a teaser, then, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
A trailer, so to speak. Yeah.
All right. Well, folks, we're gonna jump right into Doctrine and Covenants section 19. So if you have your scriptures there handy, section 19 is revelation that was given to Joseph Smith in regard to Martin Harris, and we actually want to start here. I'd like to start with verse 35. And in verse 35 of section 19, it says, "Pay the debt that thou hast contracted with the printer. Release thyself from bondage." And so I want you to tell me a little bit more about what is this debt and how does this play into this revelation and when it was received by Joseph Smith.
Okay, if you read the heading, it says it was received in the summer of 1829, but there's a clue here that if you pretend like you're the Hardy Boys, you can put things together, and that's what we do at the Firm Foundation. But it says that the Lord tells him to release the debt he has contracted with the printer. Well, this contract, when Martin signed the mortgage agreement, is farm and house was as collateral was dated August 25th, 1829. So this revelation had to have been given after that date. And so it was late summer 1829. It wasn't in June or July.
Towards the end of August.
End of August, first part of September. And the thing that is interesting, too, is that agreement, it was a collateral, and the note wasn't supposed to be due until 18 months later. So here's the Lord is telling him to figure out how to sell his property and pay the printer before it becomes due.
Actually prepaying it.
That prepayment.
Yeah.
So kind of like the church telling you to, when you can, pay off your home so you're not burdened by debt. Okay, so now there's one that's created a problem because Martin actually did not do this, as we know, is that he had an agreement with the Smith family. I think it was 50-50, where they would sell the books, and then they would try to raise the money. Smith family would pay half, Martin would pay half, and so they tried to get the money out of selling the books. So one of the problems was a new book. Everybody thought it was a fraud, but the price started out at $1.75, and it dropped it to $1.25, but it only cost 60 cents per copy to for the printing, 3,000 divided by 5,000 copies, $3,000. And so part of the reason it didn't sell is the price was too high. People didn't have a lot of money to spend on a book they figured they were never going to read. They weren't going to like.
I understand. It was almost like about 2 or 3 months typical salary or typical income for somebody to be able to come up with $1.75.
Yes, and so Martin would go try to sell the books and nobody'd buy them. Well, that's just part of the reason was just the price was too high. So, and they actually had an agreement between the Smith family and Martin that gave him permission to sell the book because Joseph had the copyright, but that agreement, the copy, you can see it on the Joseph Smith papers, and I believe I talked about this, is that it's signed by Joseph Smith Sr. So what we learned from this is that Joseph Smith Sr. had power of attorney to represent Joseph Smith Jr. in a legal agreement. So I found that kind of interesting. So I didn't know that until.
It is interesting.
And you can't see it in the document. It's indexing 101. You can tell that it's Joseph Smith Sr. that signed it. And another thing that's interesting about when this revelation was given is it's also close to the time when Lucy Harris brought her false accusations against Joseph Smith and tried to put Joseph Smith on trial. He actually did go on trial. And so they're not sure exactly who the judge was, but she accused Joseph of defrauding Martin, and Martin bore testimony that Joseph didn't try to defraud him, and so Martin is the first person to stand up for the prophet Joseph Smith in a court of law. And it's interesting too is that he is the first convert outside of the Smith family to the restoration, and so it was a great sacrifice, and he was having trouble in his marriage, but he
imagine when his wife actually sues his the guy that he's doing this work for, and then he has to basically come and testify against his wife. Yeah, I could see that would be not a happy marriage going on there.
I would not want to have been in the house to hear the shouting and screaming that's gone on. It's a good thing they didn't have any close neighbors.
or recording devices. Okay.
Yes, okay. And another thing that's interesting here, and I have, like most of us here who are watching this, have to change our paradigm, that things we believed when we were younger, we find out aren't true. And this is also close to the time when, I don't remember the date, when the copyright revelation that's come out in the Joseph Smith papers, it's not canonized at the moment, but Joseph received the revelation to have, I think, Hiram and maybe a couple other, John Page, go to Canada, sell the copyright. And David Whitmer said, Joseph said, this is some revelations are of man, some are of God. Well, I believed that until just recently, until I got thinking about it, and then said, well, that's hearsay evidence. But with Joseph received that revelation, Joseph made the statement, I received no dark revelations. And so just because things didn't happen the way that the revelation said doesn't mean that it wasn't true revelation, because the brethren didn't sell the copyright. But there was two reasons why they went, and I talked with Royal Skousen, the head of the Critical Text Project, and he says that they actually went there to try and protect the Book of Mormon from being plagiarized in Canada, because the copyright only applied to the United States, the one they got in Palmyra, and also to maybe try to get some funds to help pay for the printing. So that's just some interesting
tidbits there. Well, should we go? Let's go back to the scriptures here in section 19, and in verse 3 it says, "Retaining all power." Again, this is given to Martin Harris. It says, "Given all power, even to the destroying of Satan and his works at the end of the world."
Now I'm going to get to that, but I just remembered there's one thing I want to read, and something I showed Rod. And I'd always been hunting for a tie of Martin Harris to the geography of the Book of Mormon taking place near Palmyra, and Martin didn't keep a journal, so no one's more excited about the firm foundation than Martin Harris on the other side of the veil.
That's right.
So I found this quote. It's in the book.
Thank you, Martin.
It's Susan Easton Black and Larry Porter, and it's this is what it says. An interesting sidelight evolving from the digging of the Erie Canal was reported in the Western Farmer, Palmyra, New York, September 19th, 1821, of skeletons being unearthed, and of arrowheads, pottery shards, and several plates of brass, which probably belonged to cartouche boxes. I don't know what those are.
Cartouches.
Cartouche, I guess.
Yeah, that's Jewish burial boxes.
Okay. Found near Schenectady, New York. I'm not sure how far Schenectady is from Palmyra. Periodically, the newspapers in Palmyra would pick up such commentary on the Native American association with the once extensive habitation. The Palmyra Register had previously made a general report that there was tangible evidence supporting a great civilization having existed in North America. We can safely infer from them nothing more than that this immense tract of country, which had every mark of having been for centuries past a desolate wilderness, had been thickly inhabited at some former period by a warlike people who had made such greater advances in the arts of civilized life than any of the aboriginal inhabitants of North America, who have been known since its discovery by Europeans. And the quote is Palmyra Registers, I think is where that comes from. And so in the digging of the Erie Canal, Martin Harris worked with the superintendent of roads, and part of the time he was superintendent of roads, and he was instrumental in laying out where the canal would go. So he was inspired to put it right where an archeological dig would be.
Well, that reminds me of something that's in this book. It's exploring the Book of Mormon in America's Heartland, and in here there's a book that was clear back in the 1800s. So the book is called The Antiquities of New York, and this is by E.G. Squires, not McKeon. Okay, yeah, this is E.G. Squires. This is my actual original copy here. I have a photo in the book, and it has all this other information. But it talks about, there's an actual chapter in here about the bone pits of western New York. And there's one here I was just going to mention to you. This is on page 144 in this book. And it says, quote, "In excavating the Erie Canal through the bank, another burial place was disclosed, evidently more ancient, for the bones crumbled to pieces almost immediately upon exposure to the air. The number of skeletons was represented to have been countless." So that's, again, part of when they're digging the Erie Canal. I didn't know that Martin Harris was involved with the road building and so forth there. That would have been, he might have actually seen some of this.
Yeah, this is like 1820, just happening barely after the first vision. So it was like one of the first things to be revealed after Joseph saw the Father and the Son. So it's just fascinating.
Well, that's a fascinating quote that you just had there. So if we go back to verse 3, should we go back to that now?
Yes.
Okay. So retaining all power, even to the destroying of Satan and his works, at the end of the world, and the last great day of judgment, which I shall pass upon the inhabitants thereof, judging every man according to his works and the deeds which he hath done.
Okay, and I like to kind of tie this back to Section 3 and Section 10, which you've done already. The sections that have to do with the lost manuscript, and the loss of the manuscript, it affects me very greatly. Probably more than just about anybody in the church, simply because I'm a descendant from Lucy Harris, and there's not very many of us. It comes through my mother's side from my grandfather. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the lost manuscript. I talked about it in my first presentation that's up on the streaming site. I gave it 2 years ago. And this here, we've got a replica of the box I had a friend make, where this is the first box where Joseph put the plates after he came home. It was Alvin's laptop desk, and we've heard the story. Hiram was using it and dumped everything on the floor.
Now, when you say laptop desk, it wasn't for his laptop. It was...
Oh, not a okay. Yeah, no computers back then. But
that would be anomalous.
The thing that's interesting about this box is it has this horizontal section. It's about 3 1/8 inches long. I went and saw the original. The original is up in the Church History Museum, but the Church History Museum, I don't like how the plates are oriented, because they've got the plates turned and they're kind of in the middle, and a child can see up the line and say, there's no way they'd fit, and be able to close the lid. But the way the plates have to be oriented is the way Rod and I have got them here, with the rings to the back, and then the rings fit in this 3-inch section. And it can slide further back, and I don't know whether this will work, but everything always doesn't work perfectly, but these plates might be a little thicker than they actually were. So I did a model, you can see it in my presentation, where I compare the thickness to what Joseph Smith said in the Wentworth letter. That's as far as size, and that's what I use as my most reliable description.
Of the dimensions of the
and they would just barely fit. They'd have been close. He said they were near 6 inches in thickness, and they would just barely be able to close the lid, because he had to lock it, because he can't risk his siblings getting up in the middle of the night and thinking it's a Christmas present and trying to open it, So it's just interesting that the Lord prepared things to protect Joseph. So I'd like to kind of put a plug in for my friend Don Bradley. Have you met Don Bradley, Rod?
Yeah.
Okay, you know him then?
I don't know him. I've met him before. Yeah.
We've got to get him to give a video or presentation sometime. It's fascinating. He wrote this book on the 116 pages. And
hold up here so we can see
hold it so people can see it. And if you really want to study the Book of Mormon, this is groundbreaking. Don Bradley got after me when I went to one of the presentations, because I was telling somebody he's like Captain Kirk, boldly goes where no man goes before. But he definitely does. And he revolutionized my feelings about the lost manuscript. In my first presentation, I thought of the 116 pages, and that comes from Joseph Smith, and there's someone who said, well, that's just an estimate. Well, I'm an estimator by trade, and usually when you give an estimate, you go with the even multiple of 5. Like, I wouldn't say to Rod, you look like you're 25. He looks a little older than that anyway. I'm just trying to...
Yeah, I'd say so.
I'm just trying to butter you up a little bit. But I wouldn't say Rod looks like he's 24 or 26. I would say he looks like he's 25. So I think...
round it to the next...
Yeah, the next multiple of 5. Yeah. So I think that Joseph knew that there was 116 pages. Okay, and that's why he put that in the first edition. Now, when you, in any book, or you have a sheet and it's print, and you fold it over in half, and you actually get 4 pages of print out of one sheet. Okay, so, but since they had to buy paper individually, what if Joseph was saying they had 116 sides to sheets so they could write on it. This is just one sheet. That would mean 58 sheets, both two-sided, which would equal 116. And what this does is it doubles the expected length of the lost manuscript. And I'll explain a little bit of Don's
his thoughts,
his hypothesis and his thoughts, and it makes more sense to me. Okay, and here I've got a replica that I made with the help of Val Bagley, a good friend of all of us.
Yes.
And this is actually text from the printer's manuscript, and it's not quite to size proportionately, but what they did is they made what they call gatherings. It's not a bunch of loose sheets. There's too much risk of the ends getting curled up or torn or ripped or getting lost. So they would make like booklets, and it would be normally 6 pages, and it would, when folded in half, 6 times 4 is 24. And there's a thought that the 116 pages was gatherings that equal there was 6 of gatherings of 6 and 1 of 5, so 6, and when you do the math, it equals 116. But Don Bradley was up at the archives doing research on another topic, and he came across some minutes from a state conference in 1850s somewhere time, and in Provo, and Emer, who is one that was allowed to see the lost manuscript. No, it wasn't Emer. It was preserved. I don't know. I don't think Emer saw it unless Martin broke his oath and showed it to him. But he said it has near 200 pages, and so if you, as I just said, 116 is full-sided that they can write on, and the second page of one sheet is the back side. We would have the lost 232 pages, which is, Emer said it's close to 200.
So the Book of Lehi would have been really one of the biggest books then in the entire book of
Yes, and so it covers about the same length of time as, because it ended in Words of Mormon, back and from Lehi down to Words of Mormon. Each one's approximately 500 years. Okay, so it makes sense that if it covers the same length of time, it would be about the same amount of inscription or inscribed abridgment from the prophet Mormon. And also, if you figure out, and I did this a little bit in my first presentation, the rate of translation, Joseph and Martin would have been up to 4 pages a day, and Joseph and Oliver were 7 pages a day, because how could Joseph and Martin, if they work all day, go from 2 pages, and then Oliver helps? It's all of a sudden 2 to 7, quite a bit more. I'm sure Oliver could write better than Martin, being a school teaching more learned, but it just makes a lot of sense. So I don't know for sure, nobody does, but it's just interesting. And there's one thing in my first presentation, I won't go into it here for sake of time, is there's something that I call the hidden miracle, the lost manuscript, as far as when they stopped translating, how it has to do with Emma's giving birth to Joseph and Emma's first son, the one that died, and there was a retained portion, and the miraculous retained portion, that it didn't go with the lost manuscript, and how it wasn't part of a gathering. So I give my hypothesis on that. If anybody wants to go in that, I'd like to eventually do a presentation just on that, but I haven't got that far yet. So, and then in Don Bradley's book, a lot of it comes from someone by the name of Fayette Lapham, interview with Joseph Smith Sr. And Fayette Lapham was actually Martin's third cousin, because Martin's mother was Rhoda Lapham. So there's a connection there. That's interesting. Now, Jonathan and I, and Jonathan's in the audience right now, nodding his head, trying to keep me straight, but I talked about the lost manuscript, how we feel it wasn't burned, that we feel it was actually
preserved somehow.
Preserved. It was one of Martin's friends that ended up with it and involved other gentlemen. And the clues are in section 10. It makes no sense how someone could believe it was burned with what's stated in section 10 and inferential or preferential evidence. Jonathan saw that part of my presentation, and Lucy had no reason to even have the manuscript because, but that's in my first presentation. And so I believe it's out there. Sean Littlebear, I've talked with him, kind of a Indian legend. He feels that it's still extant, so to speak. I'm not quite sure where it is. You know Sean fairly well. Yeah. Now here's my hope and prayer, and like I say, I've discussed this extensively.
How awesome
with
would
John.
it be to find those someday?
It would be the greatest archaeological find in American history. Okay, and it's my opinion that the Lord preserves it because He doesn't want it to get in a bidding war. You know, it's someone, and I emailed Jonathan with these thoughts, that the Lord preserves it. Whoever has it gives it to the church, and it's transcribed by the Joseph Smith Papers Project, you know, kind of a crowning achievement of that effort. I myself, when I heard President Nelson talk about the ongoing restoration, I thought a lot about that. And we each have to get our own personal revelation on what that means. And to me it meant, well, Joseph restored everything for our salvation and exaltation, but he's talking about ongoing restoration. And then a light went on, is that there are many things that were given that are meant to be given to the saints that were taken away. Like one thing would be the commandment to build the New Jerusalem temple. You know, it's currently in hiatus. Another one is to live united order. It eventually we'll live it as we get closer to the millennium. But it's so things that Joseph gave us that were saints weren't ready for have been that he pulled back on will be restored, and that to me that's what President Nelson is talking about, and I am hoping and praying that restoration also includes the Book of Lehi and the lost manuscript. That when Alma talks about everything will be restored to its perfect frame, I hope our knowledge of what is in these plates is restored to its perfect frame, and then eventually we'll get the sealed portion.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, so we move on to verse 8. So this is verse 8 says, "Wherefore I will explain unto you this mystery, for it is meet unto you to know, even as mine apostles."
Okay.
So what do you? I know you had some thoughts about that.
Okay, and in my second presentation that's on the streaming side, I discussed Martin's position in this dispensation that I didn't understand it until I did the research, but we need to look at Martin. He's actually an apostle. Okay, an apostle is a witness to the world. As saints, we bear witness, you know, of Christ to each other, as a missionary to people we teach. But the apostles bear the witness to the world, and that's how they're different than us as lay members of the church. So Martin, you know, we had the three witness experience, and then section 18. You and Jonathan are going to go into that, where they were called to seek out the 12, but it was just Oliver and David that were called. It did not list Martin Harris in section 18. So it's my opinion, and I don't speak for the church. I speak for myself as his descendant, and sometimes I've been wrong. Sometimes I'm glad to be wrong. Like on the possible length of the 116 pages is Martin. We don't know if he was baptized prior to the organization of the church. Oliver Cowdery was, and David Whitmer was. So maybe Martin wasn't quite at the level of being considered an apostle at the time they had the witness experience. Mm-hmm. You know, he was to bear testimony, his commanded to bear testimony, but he had things wrong in his life that I think kept him from fully fulfilling that calling.
Probably, maybe that feud with his wife.
Yeah, it's serious. And so we have to have compassion for Martin Harris, because one thing, Oliver and David were young. They weren't married, so they didn't have family issues, and it was easier to get the Spirit. potentially. Sometimes it's hard to get the spirit when you have arguments with your wife. You think of Joseph and Emma, and when he's translating, and he had aught with Emma, and all was dark, and he had to work it out and pray, and before he could translate again.
Oh, the Lord said right in these early part of the Doctrine and Covenants, if you're not one, you're not mine. So that's another little tidbit that we can.
Okay, so it's because of those domestic concerns of the reason why I feel Martin had to leave the first prayer circle. Now, one thing about...
When you say that, can you explain that a little bit more in detail? The first prayer circle that you're talking about, that was...
When they went out to get their witness.
Right.
Okay, when Joseph and Joseph had called the three witnesses, talked to them each individually, said, the Lord's called you to be a witness.
And they all went out to...
in the woods by the Peter Whitmer home, and they went in, each one praying in sequence, and Martin had to leave. And there's one thing that we have to remember what Joseph Smith said. They had the witness, and then he went and found Martin, and Martin had another witness. Sometimes people think, well, Martin didn't get the same witness as the other two, because he wasn't as worthy. He had a lesser witness. But I don't believe that, and I go to what the prophet Joseph Smith, and when there's a difference of opinion, I like to go to Prophet Joseph, like we all do. And he said the same vision that he had seen with David and Oliver was open to me. So I believe that Martin saw the same vision with the sword of Laban, the plates, the Liahona, and I even had Val Bagley draw up a picture for me where it illustrates that. So, okay. And now, so Martin's is an apostle, but he's not ordained yet, in my opinion. I don't know when they were officially ordained. They had received the Melchizedek priesthood by then, but Martin was ordained a high priest in 1831. Okay, at the June 3rd, I think it was, the same date that I received the priesthood. Same day of the year, obviously. And in the priesthood, we need to remember, we cannot give an office we don't hold ourselves. We can't even stand in the circle. So I guess you're a high priest, okay. But if you were just an elder and someone was being ordained a high priest, you couldn't stand in the ordinating circle, whether you were mouth or not. So you can't give something you can't have. I liken it to Martin can't give Joseph $50 to go from Palmyra to Harmony if he doesn't have $50 to give him. And that's another story I explained there's a misconception about that, how Martin gave him silver rather than paper money, and cinema sometimes depicts it as paper money, but I won't go into that. So Martin sometime was ordained an apostle officially, and it could have been in 1834 when Joseph went to Michigan, Pontiac, Michigan, that's the only time when the three witnesses and Joseph Smith went on a mission, all four of them together. Or he could have been ordained in 1835, I think it was February the 14th, when they called the 12, when they were performing the actual ordinations. Maybe Martin was ordained before they actually started to ordain the quorum of the 12. But you got to realize the three witnesses, it's a one-time quorum, but they're commanded from the witness they received to testify before the world. And we know that's what an apostle does. So this quorum will never be repeated in the church. It's a one-time quorum for the whole dispensation. Okay, and if you take your priesthood lineage and you trace it back, Jonathan and you have probably both traced your priesthood lineage, you go back through the three witnesses. I just found that was interesting to actually know that Martin was an apostle and the three witnesses, even though they weren't actually members of the quorum of the 12. Okay, so that takes care of that. So we can go ahead.
So go ahead and go to. So let's go to verse 15. And verse 15, again, we're in section 19 here. Therefore I command you to repent. Repent lest I smite you by the rod of my mouth. He had some serious repenting here to do.
Oh, yes.
And by my wrath and by my anger, and your sufferings be sore, how sore you know not, how exquisite you know not, yea, how hard to bear you know not.
And so I thought a lot about this.
Wow.
The whole impact of this didn't even hit me until I was preparing for this lesson within the last couple of days. And I've only known since Monday that I was going to do this, is that here Martin had to make one of the hardest admissions of wrongdoing in the history of the world, to tell Joseph Smith that he'd lost the manuscript. He broke his oath that he'd made with the Lord. And got to remember this oath was not that he took the manuscript. It was that he showed it to people outside of the group of five that he was given permission. Yeah. And see, Joseph Smith kept his oath with God and not showing the plates to anyone outside of who he had permission to.
The witnesses.
The witnesses. Yeah. And Martin did not keep a similar oath on a lesser level. So here's Martin, and so what could be worse than having to make that confession? And so we look at the history, and the books weren't selling. Martin did not try to sell his property to prepay the mortgage deed, to take some of the pressure off. And maybe had he done that, they could have sold the books for a lesser price, and maybe they could have sold some and had more converts. No one will ever know. But as they, the book was printed, the books didn't sell. This was, later on in 1830, 18 months from February of 1831, I believe. So the pressure on Martin became very great because the Smiths weren't able to come up with any money. And so Martin is the only one who could have financed the Book of Mormon.
About how old was Martin at this point in time in his life?
1831, 31, and 17, about 47, 48. He was born in 1783.
He's almost twice as old as Joseph and Oliver.
Yes.
Who are basically in their early 20s at this point in time.
Yes. And
so he's a bit of a man of means. He has a beautiful farm there in Palmyra, or just outside of Palmyra. And I can't remember how many acres that was, but it was quite a nice farm.
It was actually 320 acres.
Wow.
Okay, so he actually, when you think about what he sold, he deeded 80 of those acres to Lucy. It had to be through a third party because of the communal property laws that I think came from England. So they considered a married couple as one, and all the negotiating power and ownership was in the husband. And so he inherited 150 from his father. His father helped settle Palmyra, one of the first settlers. I won't try to do the math, but he sold 151 acres. Okay, so he only sold one more acre than what he had received as inheritance. He'd helped build up that 150 acres. He's worked on it when he was younger on his dad's farm, so it wasn't like it was totally a gratuity that he hadn't partially earned. But the house was included, so he lost his house. In that 80 acres, he built Lucy a smaller house, and so 151 plus 80, 231, 69, and about 89 acres is what he maintained after he sold the property to Thomas Lakey, and it was bought by Christina Granger. I go
so he kept some acres.
Yeah, and I go through that in my second presentation.
Is in one of the verses coming up here.
Yes, and so he wasn't left destitute. He didn't have to give up everything, but he did give up his home. And
it kind of sounds like he gave up his inheritance.
Yes, he had no inheritance to pass on to his son, George, my great-great-grandfather, or to help his daughter, two of his married daughters. And so, when I looked at that, and when I did my second presentation, I discovered patterns in dispensations, and I call it dispensational parallelism. I'm not going to explain it here. It's takes a long time to explain it, but it's like we have a Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost in the Godhead. That's the overall dispensation of the earth, and then you take our sub-dispensations, and let's just go to Abraham, the three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, father of the faithful. Isaac, I think it means supplanter, but he was the one who willingly went to the altar to be sacrificed, like the Savior. And you have Jacob, whose family was the witness of the covenant. And they also had a ram in the thicket when Abraham was offering his sacrifice. So Martin Harris was the ram in the thicket for the last dispensation. Had he not put up his property, the whole timing would have been thrown off, because there was no backup. There was nobody with a lot of money. It would have taken several months, a year or two. I think of how that would have thrown off the conversion dates of Brigham Young.
Well, the missionaries going out and everything else, yeah.
So you can see why, if he wouldn't have done that, how he would have suffered, because he would have totally been responsible. Maybe it's not even a little fair to put that much responsibility on one person for throwing off the Lord's timing of the last dispensation. So that, I feel, would have been the suffering had he not fulfilled his promise to finance the Book of Mormon. And one thing, when you ask for revelation from the Lord, and we all get patriarchal blessings, and we have a mouthpiece, of the patriarch, but this revelation from the Lord, Christ is speaking in the first person to Martin Harris. Christ is definitely aware of Martin Harris and his life and what's right and what's wrong. And so that carries so much power, a patriarchal blessing from the Lord himself. And so you have to do what the Revelation says, and we know that James Covell didn't. That was a situation where someone got a revelation from the Lord and didn't follow it. But another thing, if you get a revelation direct from the Lord, He will tell you some of your sins and mistakes, and it's all the world knows through generations and generations. Think of how hard that would be.
You have to humble yourself a lot.
Oh,
and it's interesting because he talks about how sore you know not and how exquisite you know not, and then the Lord Himself actually goes into a description of how He suffered in the Garden of Eden and on the cross and so forth, and fulfilling the atonement and His part in that. And so that happens in verses 16, 17, 18, and 19, and Jonathan and I covered that. In verse 21, it says, "And I command you that you should preach not but repentance, and show not these things unto the world until it is wisdom in me." How well did he? So that was the commandment. Don't show these things to the world until I say so.
Okay, and
so what happened?
Okay, this is given before the book was printed, so they just had the manuscript. So we know but Martin asked Joseph if he could take the manuscript. He realized, I think Martin asking for the manuscript wasn't necessarily a sin. He should have taken no for an answer, like a child asking for a piece of candy. But he wanted to convert his wife and make it easier at home on himself. And
he probably wanted to have her be on his side instead of against him.
He had a noble intention. There was no deception. He just broke the oath, showed it to too many people. It wasn't copyrighted. I go into that in my first presentation, some of the mistakes that Joseph made and that Martin made. Another mistake was, why did they not just give him one gathering instead of all of them? Why did he take the whole manuscript? But so it wasn't to be shown until it was printed. And so they... And Jonathan's one that clued me on to this, is that he feels that when they altered the words, they actually made a separate copy. Because if it was close to this and in foolscap, there's no room to make a lot of alterations because the lines are so close together. But nobody's going to alter a book. Because you instead of just one copy, you've got 5,000, and you can't change everything in 5,000 copies.
Yep, not going to happen. So let's go to verse 25. And again, I command thee that thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor seek thy neighbor's life. This is a little bit about coveting. And then verse 26 says, and again, I command thee that thou shalt not covet thine own property, but impart it freely to the printing of the Book of Mormon, which contains the truth and the word of God. A little bit of coveting.
Yeah.
What can you tell? Any historical documentation about what that might have been about?
Well, there's a lot of hearsay, and I will give my interpretation. And this is not fun. This hurts me greatly to bring forth these skeletons out of the closet. Of your ancestors. All of us, when we do our genealogy, boy, I wish you wouldn't have done that. How do I hide that story? Why did somebody upload it to Family Search? Why couldn't they kept that in? So,
but we all make our mistakes, and that's part of who we are. It's part of how we become who we become.
Yes, and so one thing about Martin Harris is the things that happened to him in his life exemplify the principles taught in the Book of Mormon: repentance, commitment. Some of the greatest sermons I listed in my first presentation. Some of the greatest sermons. King Benjamin's sermon has to do with the hidden miracle of the lost manuscript. Alma's sermon on faith. The church, the gospel is still in its infancy, so he was told not to only preach repentance. But when we get back to coveting, Martin had a situation in his family. Okay, as we know, his wife prepared a separate bedroom when he came back from New York. She wanted to go with him to New York, and he left in the middle of the night. So,
Nope, not coming.
Whatever word you want to think broke loose when he came home. He made a sacrifice when he went to New York, to fulfill the scripture in Isaiah. It all wasn't peaceful in his family. He did it. It cost him his bedroom relationship with his wife, who was actually his first cousin. Okay. So it was another instance of a close family marriage. Okay, but it was allowed back then. In some states, I believe it's still legal today, but frowned upon for genetical reasons. So, so it was said, covet his neighbor's wife, nor seek thy neighbor's life. Well, I believe he had an emotional relationship with a neighbor, is Mrs. Haggard. I think her first name was Sally. I don't know if I remember for sure, but he had helped the Haggards with a D, I think it's a Haggard instead of Haggard, build a home, and they were his neighbor, and he used to go visit, and sometimes the husband wouldn't be there, and so it appears he. I get along better.
A little bit of a shine with her then. Huh?
Yeah, I get along better with her than I do my wife. That type of thing possibly. It actually was not wise behavior on his part, because Lucy Harris and her brother Peter Harris's wife Abigail got with Dr. Hurlbut, who wrote the Hurlbut affidavits, and they accused Martin of having an affair. So it's kind of like your kids. Don't stay out after midnight when you're dating, even though if they don't fall into transgression, you can open yourself to being falsely accused. Right. And so even though it was hearsay evidence, and then as far as nor seek thy neighbor's life, I don't believe that Martin had any kind of plan to take the life of his neighbor, but maybe he got mad and, I'd like to punch him in the face. Well, when we get angry enough to want to do bodily injury to another person, we run the risk of what if we knock that person and he loses balance and falls on the ground, hits his head on a rock, and it could be a manslaughter case. We just have to control our anger and not have physical confrontation, especially as men, being the stronger vessel. And this is a revelation. There's a testimony of the prophet Joseph Smith I never even thought about before. This is one of the strongest testimonies the mission of the prophet Joseph Smith that we have. And the explanation in my mind is this. If Joseph was trying to defraud Martin, and Martin wants Joseph to get a revelation, it's not going to tell him what he's doing wrong, that he's coveting his neighbor's wife and thinking about taking his neighbor's life. That's not a good way to defraud Martin out of his money. So, no, seriously. And so Joseph...
That's not how to win friends and influence
people. Okay, that book wasn't available then. But Joseph told it the way that the Lord said.
Yeah.
So let's give both credit. Joseph didn't revise the revelation, thinking this is too strong a language for Martin. Got to realize Martin got it because he asked for a revelation from the Lord in first person, voice of the Lord, and Martin had to do what it said. And so we go back to coveting his property. Martin was told to prepay, and he didn't do it. And so, but he was imparted freely. But when you put up collateral, you kind of still hang on to it. It's not freely because it's signed that you're going to get paid back.
Yeah, the collateral basically doesn't mean that you've actually paid for it. It means that you are offering it as just in case it doesn't somehow else get paid for.
Yes, you still have strings attached. So he did not give his offering freely to begin with. Yes, he's the only one that could have put up the collateral to finance the printing, but as it came down, the notes due, he could have derailed everything by, worked something out so he didn't have to pay for the whole thing, but he did follow through with it, and he lost the amount that we've talked about. So
that's the $3,000.
Yeah, for the $3,000, it actually came in gold coins from a woman who emigrated from England, Christina Granger. That was third party Thomas Lakey. She ended up with staying in the house, and I won't go into that. It's in my second presentation, but she never joined the church. She stayed in Palmyra. Some of her descendants might still be there, the women that bought Martin's house, and she had her temple work done in 1995. It's very recent.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so we move to then verse 29. So we talked about a little bit about why he was maybe what the Lord was talking about with his coveting his neighbor's wife and his neighbor's life and his property. Verse 29 says, "And thou shalt declare glad tidings, yea, publish it upon the mountains and upon every high place and among every people, that thou shalt be permitted to see."
And I wish Martin would have understood this. I'm kind of this is a supposition here, but I feel that Martin had a little bit of a problem with Oliver and David because Oliver seemed to be in Joseph's favor. He was a second elder. He was younger, and here Martin.
Well, this jealousy thing seems to kind of have reared its ugly head a couple times here.
It goes along with coveting. Maybe I think Martin coveted Oliver's position a little bit, and maybe Joseph's.
Especially since he's an older, established individual. He's a honorable member of the community and so forth. And these other guys are kind of young whippersnappers.
Yeah, this thing works a lot of. Okay. So, but Martin didn't understand what it meant to be an apostle. Maybe it wasn't explained to him. Maybe he did understand. I don't know, but he had a little bit of a different mission than Oliver and David. Martin was a traveling apostle. He went with Joseph to Missouri. He went with Joseph to Michigan. He went on a mission with his brother to New York and Pennsylvania. And, I believe Oliver Cowdery went on the first mission to the Lamanites. But Martin was more of the traveling witness. And so the Lord didn't want to call Martin to a high church position because it would have kept him in Kirtland, and so he wanted him to be free to travel, so he was never more than just a member of the first high council.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So. All right, and then to finish up here, we have a couple more verses. In verse 33, it says, "And misery thou shalt receive if thou wilt slight these counsels, yea, even the destruction of thyself and property."
Okay.
And then Go ahead.
There's one thing I missed in my notes here. I'd like to talk about an experience that I've had, and it's really fascinating. And there's 3,000 copies. When Martin sold his property, the agreement included 250 copies going to
him personally.
No, to the Thomas Lakey. Okay, he was kind of the broker between. Thomas Lakey bought the note and then sold the property to Christina Granger, and she was a widow and then later remarried. Okay, so Martin's a traveling witness, and so there's about 500 original copies still in existence. An estimate from my friend John Hajicek.
That's today. You mean?
Today, yeah. So what's that? 10%. I've seen a few of them. I've got a picture of me holding the original copy, and believe me, the only thing that's worse to drop than the whole original Book of Mormon is a baby. A newborn baby, because I don't even like to say how much they're worth. But I have a picture taken with one. They wouldn't let me take a picture of who it belonged to because it increases the value too much. So there was seriously. So you have to be very careful. And
yeah.
I know someone else that's recently purchased a copy. So. Yeah. You don't want to noise it around too much. But nope. So there was a gentleman that had a copy, and he gave a fireside. And I wish I could make contact with him. He could give a good presentation on the actual printing of the Book of Mormon. But he had one come to his possession, and I won't tell the story out of respect for him and for time, but it miraculously came down in his possession, and he showed it to me. And he opens the cover, and I see who it belongs to. And I recognize the last name as the same last name as Martin Harris's mother. And I tried to find the owner in church records. Someone joined the church and couldn't find it. And I finally, within the last month, found out who I believe it was by finding her last name. And it was, I believe, a book that was given to Martin's mother's brother's wife. So actually his aunt, and she wrote her name in it because it's the same last name, but it was not her. She wrote her married name in there, and so how Martin got it to her, he could have when he went on his mission to New York and Pennsylvania with his brother Emer, they could have gone over to Rhode Island. We don't know. He could have given it to his parents, and they could have given it to her. But I believe that's who it belonged to. And I know the name of the gentleman. I know the town he lives in. I haven't been able to make contact with, but I think the value of his book just went up because it was given to Martin.
Maybe passed through Martin Harris's hands.
Very good chance that Martin personally gave it to his aunt.
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty cool. Now you have to follow up on that and let us know what happens there.
Yeah, I have to contact one person. The gentleman's retired, so he didn't answer my email to his business that he's retired from. So, okay.
So let's see. We're in verse.
Still 34. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. So
okay.
30. No, I didn't read 34 before. So it says, "Impart a portion of thy property, yea, even part of thy lands, and all save the support of thy family." I think this is an interesting statement here by the Lord, because he's basically not asking him to give up everything. He says, keep enough so that you can still make it, you can still survive, have enough, acres to do that. But go ahead and then in verse 35 again, which we read at the beginning, is but pay the debt. Relieve yourself from this bondage. He says,
and there's really a prophecy in this verse. We look at Martin Harris, and I'll give away some of my thunder, and I have a list of firsts for Martin Harris. It says the last shall be first, and he was the first to do this. I'm going to go over in my presentation.
Oh, and nice.
So what this is a prophecy of is, kind of the part of the things in the Book of Mormon that we don't have, that's very likely in the large places of Nephi. We don't know the principles and laws upon which the Nephites governed their society after the Savior.
Well, I want to see the maps in the front.
Yeah.
The maps that they refer to map 4, from further on.
But of how they lived, united order and consecration, where they had all things in common.
Yep.
We know that it's a very lofty goal, and I've often wondered, why did the Lord try to introduce something so lofty to people that were just barely learning the gospel? But it didn't work very well in New Testament times. It didn't work very well in the early days of the church, but we have to come to that unity of faith, and we're working towards that slowly. But Martin went with Joseph Smith to Missouri, and he was there when Joseph dedicated the temple site in New Jerusalem, and Martin actually, I believe, was the first one to put money forth to buy property around the temple site. So Martin Harris actually has the first inherited right to property in the New Jerusalem after the Smith family. We know the Smith family will be first in basically everything because of their sacrifice, and Joseph being the head of the dispensation. And so this is a prophecy that he's going to be called to live the law of consecration, and also the prophecy that he's to publish tidings. One of the scriptures back is that he was also on a committee to help publish the periodicals of the church, and they were starting to get the Book of Commandments together. Can't remember who else was on the committee. So the Lord was still using Martin, and even though he gave this sacrifice, the Lord kept asking. It's not like we give the sacrifice and we put our feet up on the desk and relax till we die. It's an ongoing thing.
Well, that actually was kind of fulfilled also in verse 36. The Lord said to leave his house and home, except when ye shall desire to see thy family. This may have been a little bit of a relief for Martin. Leave the house and home, not having too good a relationship, but he still had his children and so forth, and he loved them, and I'm sure he wanted to be with them and see them, but he was basically told by the Lord here to leave and go do your mission.
Yes, and this is very interesting how this is fulfilled. Okay, Martin's in Palmyra. He's got his older son, George. He only had one son that lived. It's thought there was two, but according to Susan Easton Black, and a professional genealogist, that they thought he had a son, Henry. It's even on Lucy's gravestone, but he belongs to different parents. But his daughter Lucy, who'd married Flanders Dyke, who Jonathan, I believe, could have been involved in the theft of the lost manuscript because he wrote the counterfeit copy of the characters that the three of us were just discussing here a few minutes ago. And he had another daughter that got married. I think she lived close to Palmyra. So they'd already been commanded to go to Ohio. Joseph Smith was there. There'd been two earlier excursions. Can't remember who led the first one, but the second one was with the Smith family. Mother Smith went with it, and Martin headed up the third excursion. It said there was about 50 souls, and I haven't figured out who in the world the 50 souls would have been. It would have been like his brother Emer. I don't know who was baptized members. Martin was baptized a member immediately after Oliver Cowdery and Joseph were baptized when the church was organized, and we know that they had a rebaptism. I can't remember which section it is, but rebaptism because they could be baptized and confirmed into the church because they didn't have the church back when the priesthood was first restored, and so Martin's there, and the reason Martin went to Kirtland, left his family, was to fulfill this. The commandment to fulfill this came in this revelation, but also through a direct admonition from the prophet Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith wrote to Martin, leave your home, come down to Kirtland. The Lord wants you in Kirtland. Bring the copies of the Book of Mormon. And so Martin had a lot of responsibilities, and that he had to organize this the people, but he also had to figure out how to bring close to, I don't know, 4,500 copies of the Book of Mormon. You know, how many crates would that have taken?
Yeah.
And I guess he stored. Well, he went to Kirtland before he actually went back and paid off the mortgage, so he would have kept them stored at his house. But the nice thing is that the Erie Canal was just well, you've been to Palmyra, you know how close it is to the Martin Harris home.
Yeah.
And so there's...
In fact, the Grandin Press is just on the other side of the Erie Canal from Martin Harris's place.
Okay.
A couple of miles away.
Now, there's one thing I need to go back to, verse 33. Do we go over verse 33?
A little bit, but go ahead. If you
Okay, and I'll read it again. And misery thou shalt receive if thou wilt slight these counsels, yea, even the destruction of thyself and property. And we talked about how Martin didn't fully follow the admonition to sell his property and prepay the debt, so the mortgage wasn't hanging over his head and the Book of Mormon costs too much and nobody would buy it.
So what happened then?
Okay. And so he didn't quite give the offering freely, but let's give him credit for finally giving the offering. Okay, he kept the acreage we've talked about, and he
About
would
80 acres.
80 acres. He would go back to Palmyra and sell part of it, and that's how he helped support Lucy. He never divorced from Lucy, and helped support himself in Kirtland. He had a house in Kirtland. I don't know if he ever moved on the Lehman Copley farm or not. Okay, but the part of this warning actually received fulfillment, and we all know in the gospel that we make promises. It's better to freely give than to be forced to. Okay, have the Lord forced to. The Heber Kimball said, if we make a covenant, we should freely keep that covenant. If we don't, the Lord will eventually allow circumstances to happen that will, so we'll realize that we need to keep that covenant. Okay, we all know that. We've all been chastened.
Make things bad enough for you that you realize, oh, that's what I need to do.
It's just, like I say, this is the Book of Mormon, studying Martin Harris's life. He's... okay, so he eventually sold all of his land. Lucy died in 1836, and I don't even know who inherited.
So just a few years after
this.
Yeah,
the 80 acres. And then right after, he married Caroline Young, and that was performed by Heber C. Kimball. That's another interesting thing, is that the state of Ohio recognized the apostolic ecclesiastical authority of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles
to perform
marriages.
Okay.
I'll go into that in my next presentation more.
Okay.
I guess this is lightning before the thunder, or thunder before the lightning. I don't know. But it was part of the trailer here. But so it talks about destruction of thyself and property. Now the house. Mrs. Granger remarried. She lived in the house, but the house burned down in 1849 and was rebuilt. And I think it's the house that's there today.
Yeah.
But part of that destruction is the church has never been able to buy the Martin Harris home. You know, they have the farm, the Smith home.
It's still farmland around it.
They've got part of the farmland, but they just can't get the Martin Harris home to have tours. And I do believe that foundation was walled up by the Smith family. You know, Alvin, Joseph, and Hiram, and Father Smith. I don't know if the part of the foundation is visible, if it's been plastered over. I don't know. I've never seen pictures inside the home.
Yeah, I've been there many times with our tours and so forth. And in fact, here's some of we'll show some pictures here of the home and so forth. And they have this neat kind of cobblestone kind of finish on the outside, which is kind of unique to the area as well, coming from the lakes and so forth in the area there.
That could have been done by the Smiths.
Yeah. But as far as the foundation is concerned, I've never been able to get into or see, and there's never been anybody there when we've been there either. So it's interesting. I think that's just kind of a restored property that nobody can go and see.
I know, and had Martin paid or maybe sold it to somebody else, but you know, it's one thing to say he should have sold the property, but I don't know who it has sold it to. We don't know. That's just part of history we'll never know.
So can I ask you just a couple of final questions? So overall, what do you think happened in 116 pages?
What I think. Okay, can I just go one thing and then I'll address that?
All right.
Maybe even Jonathan will, when he gets up here, will say his opinion. But Martin Harris had issues with the church, and I think it was over two things. He didn't believe in paper money, so he didn't join the Curtin Safety Society. When he gave Joseph the $50, he gave it in silver, and so I just get aggravated. These wonderful movies, and then they show Martin pulling out a 50 to give it to Joseph, and I said, it's not that hard to do the research. Tell it the way it happened. And I even discussed this with Anthony Sweat.
Use real money.
Yeah, real money.
Yeah.
Just a pouch.
Yeah. Yep.
But and then because we talked about him having first inheritance in the land of Zion and independence, and he didn't want to join the saints out west because he thought Zion was going to be redeemed and he had right to the property. So he didn't want to go west, and he was waiting for Zion to be redeemed. And one of the things that brought him west was the railroad.
Ultimately, he did come west.
He did come west.
Was it Clarkston, Utah?
He died in Clarkston, became west.
Up in Cache Valley.
He
used to have a Martin Harris pageant up there for years.
In 87, 88 years old, you don't want to go 1,500 miles in a wagon. So the railroad was instrumental in bringing Martin Harris here, along with Edward Stevenson, who cared enough. And that's really a parable of leave the 99 and go in search of the lost sheep. Edward Stevenson, a member of the presidency of the 70, left his family always on missions, the most traveled missionary, maybe even more so than Parley P. Pratt. He was definitely the most traveled 70, but he went and he brought Martin Harris. He cared enough to bring Martin Harris. Without Edward Stevenson's love, who was actually helped converted by Martin Harris because he came from Michigan when the three Witness and Joseph went to Michigan on their mission. And so
he went out and convinced Martin to come back with him back to the West.
And he'd had his son-in-law come, William H. Homer, other of the elders, and they couldn't convince him, but Edward Stevenson was able to. So that's kind of wrap things up. Other than now to your question, okay.
I have one final one. So go ahead. So what about the 116
pages?
Yeah.
Okay. Lucy didn't burn it. I'm pretty confident of that, and Jonathan agrees with me because she wouldn't have had it in the house to burn it because Martin could have found it. He knows every nook and cranny and every secret hiding place where his wife hides her jewelry, and and it said.
Really, he did? Because I don't.
Yeah, he did.
I have no idea if she hides stuff. She hides candy or whatever here.
If we really look at Section 10, the evidence is really there. If you even do a little bit of a legal approach, examining evidence as a paralegal would do,
like Jonathan
would, is that it says the men altered the pages, not Lucy Harris. And why would the men alter the pages or make a new copy and then give it back to Lucy? If they planned on printing it, the Lord revealed that.
They'd want to keep the original.
Keep it. Yeah. The men would finance the printing. It wasn't going to be printed for free. Lucy, if she starts using some of her allowance that Martin doesn't know where it goes, and she's paying for printing, nothing makes sense. And that's why I discuss inferential or presumptive evidence. I'm not sure what the difference is, but Jonathan does. But see, there's nothing to gain by Lucy having the manuscript, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit the narrative of Section 10. And so what I feel, and this is my opinion, and a lot of these ideas came from Jonathan, and what Jonathan and I discussed makes sense, is that Martin showed it to many friends, and there was someone named Dr. Seymour. I guess, was he a family doctor? Do you remember? I don't remember. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. Who knows back then? It wasn't as strict as it is now as far as getting a medical license, but
some people actually even just named their kids doctor.
Dr. Hurlbut was named doctor. That was his actual
His mom named
name.
Him doctor so that everybody had to call him doctor. When
telling your kid what you want him to do for a living when he's first born. So I can't remember what the source, but it said Dr. Seymour had it, and he would read it to his patients. I feel that one of the friends that came to Martin's house that he showed the manuscript to was in on the theft. I don't know, that's his personal opinion. I have no idea. I could be as wrong could be. But so Martin went away to jury duty, and one of the mistakes, and I talked about this, is I don't know if it was locked up. It was in another drawer. It wasn't in his wife's drawer because he picked the lock and caused a fracas, enmity between his wife because it marred her bureau. So, but Martin was gone to business, take care of business, and jury duty. The manuscript was left unguarded, and maybe Lucy knew where it was, maybe she didn't. Maybe the friend that he'd showed it to knew where Martin kept it, if Lucy didn't know, and that friend came and got with Lucy, maybe a little bit with Flanders Dyke. He lived in Palmyra, Martin's son-in-law, and they took the manuscript, concocted the plan, but there would be legal issues, and because it wasn't copyrighted, they might not have been sure as far as publishing, because they couldn't do that with the printer's manuscript, because Joseph had the copyright, and they tried to print some of the printer's manuscript in Palmyra or Wayne County Sentinel or something. Joseph went and strong-armed the gentleman that was doing it. I don't remember his name, but he had to cease and desist. He said, cease and desist, I'm going to sue you, and he had the copyright to back him up. And so let's just say it was Dr. Seymour, but he needed legal advice, and then possibly Jonathan came up with a hypothesis that maybe Luther Bradish was involved. Luther Bradish was a lawyer and a kind of politician that had lived in Palmyra, that knew Martin and knew Lucy. He had moved to Albany. He'd kind of moved up in the world. He actually was the first person Martin visited when he went to New York, that he went to Albany first and then went to see Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Anthony. Sorry that I have the name slip my mind. Thanks for filling that in. But maybe, maybe the manuscript ended up with Luther Bradish, and that Joseph suspected, or maybe even had it revealed to him, we don't know, that Joseph said he made efforts to get it back. And in the original edition, and I think that involved more than just Martin, go again and look under your pillows and tear apart your feather tick for your bed and see if you can find it. I think Joseph had suspicions, and Jonathan said that Joseph may have actually gone to talk with Luther Bradish and tried to pin him down. Martin couldn't get anything from Lucy. I don't know how much Lucy was involved, other than I think she knew some of the plot, but I think she just allowed a gentleman into the house, and he took the manuscript, and that was the last she saw of it, potentially. So when she said she didn't know anything about it, she may have been telling the truth. And
just get it out of my life, kind of thing.
Okay, and so then up to Luther Bradish, and the trail goes cold, and I wrote Jonathan an email. I even come up with a little pamphlet. I think I've got it in the pamphlet. I don't remember, but I believe it's still out there. But
well, keep following up on the leads, and if you find it, let us know. Last thing I wanted to say, Ned, is that I want to ask you, Ned, is that how do you feel as you've done this research of your ancestor, basically Martin Harris? What has it done for you and your testimony?
What it's done for my testimony is never give up on your ancestors and never give up on your children. Okay? Martin was given a patriarchal blessing from Joseph Smith Sr. in 1835. It's in the patriarchal blessing book. It's on the internet. You can actually get a copy. But he was told, you will yet teach your wife that she may be saved in the day of eternity. So here she is, this villainous, and you got to realize she was hard of hearing. She was losing everything. She had no choice in the matter because of the laws. Her husband's making all the decisions. A lot of women would have had the same struggles, but that she would obtain salvation. Well, if Martin's going to teach her, you can't teach if there's not a student. We're teaching here, but what good would us to be here if no one was going to watch the tape with no students? We really wouldn't be teaching. It takes students and teachers to have a relationship. Yeah. And so there's been two or three personal things that have happened regarding Lucy Harris that I believe she will regain her position. Now, she lost a lot of time. Martin lost a lot of time. I believe Martin Harris, had he stayed with the church, would have gone on the mission to England with Lorenzo Snow and gotten an audience in front of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, and I believe that he would have been able to personally testify as a witness of the three witness experience in front of the Queen in fulfillment of the Lord promising that his gospel will be taught in front of kings and rulers, but he lost that opportunity. Maybe he's done it in the spirit world, but I do believe Lucy will come back. I don't know how long it'll take to repair everything, because she originally had a mission to be with her husband and stand at his side to help bring forth the Book of Mormon, and Martin had to do it alone. But what I have learned is we think we know history. We have the scholars, we have the books that give us the history, but a lot of that is chronology, or I don't consider myself a chronologist, stating the events. I like to interpret. I kind of learned that from you, learned it from Don Bradley, learned it from Jonathan, from Ryan, that we don't care if we're wrong, but we try to teach the people. We
do care if we're wrong. We try not to do too much, but if we are wrong, we will correct it.
Yes. Like, I'd love to be wrong when I originally thought this was just 116 pages and it might be twice as long.
Yeah.
I got
be open to further light and knowledge.
70 pamphlets at home supporting this that I need to put I wish I could go back and put a revision in. Okay. I look at it as the scholars, and up until the point in time, we've gleaned the field of knowledge. Okay, and you know that, and Jonathan knows that. But what's the law of the harvest? As you sow, so shall you reap. Go back and glean the field. In the word of wisdom, we're taught about who keeps these sayings shall find hidden treasures. I believe that the presenters are finding these hidden treasures that are left in the field that the harvesters didn't know were there. And Joseph Smith said everything would be revealed, and even to babes and sucklings, and I feel like a babe and suckling sometimes talk about this, and compare myself to maybe some of the scholars, Susan East and Black, because I haven't put in near the time they have, but I think there's just so much evidence. It's like a journey. I didn't even know where I was going. I had no roadmap. I'm doing a presentation on Martin Harris. I'd never thought about Martin Harris, what his position was in the dispensation. One of the three witnesses in that,
which he never denied.
He never denied. 60 years of my life, and then all of a sudden, it opens up, and he's the ram in the thicket. And then we understand more about the atonement, and then we understand more about Amulek's teachings, and it's like. It's what we do in the Firm Foundation. It brings the Book of Mormon to life. We don't just read it; we live it as much as possible and understand it. And there's always a new frontier. Like, I thought, well, I'll be done with Martin Harris, and then I can, I've made my offering. I can put my feet up. I can go to the beach. No, I don't like beaches. I don't like the sand. What we do at the Firm Foundation, it's like home teaching. It's never done. Remember what they used to tell us? You remember those days. Your home teaching is never done. Yeah. There's always a new frontier. So I'd like to do a presentation on the Tree of Life. Maybe for next fall if I can get it together. It's not just on Martin Harris. look at the presentations and see if there's a niche that can help people understand the Book of Mormon.
That's what I think we wanted to do. Is one of the reasons why I wanted you to come and share some of your extensive knowledge on Martin Harris is because I think we need to honor the man that for the sacrifices that he made and for the things that, yes, did he make a mistake? Yes. Did he own up to it? Yes. Did he do things afterwards to try to correct for it? And ultimately, I think it really helps me to understand that even when we fall, when we make mistakes,
yes,
when we do stupid things, and we go, oh gosh, the Lord's never going to forgive me for this.
Boy, I've been there.
The forgiveness is always there. The Lord has always got His arms open to you, and even after many years and so forth. And when Martin Harris came back and came up to Clarkston and so forth, and he was very instrumental in other people's. They kind of wondered where he was really at and so forth, and he set it straight. He set the record straight. Said, yes, I was there. I was part of this, and he never denied that.
Never denied it. And one thing, let me explain it. I may have talked about this in my second presentation. I don't remember. Well, I'm going to talk about more in my third. Is Martin was accused of denying his testimony. Okay, he wasn't eloquent like Oliver. He would be asked, did you see him with your physical eyes? See the angel? He'd say, no, I saw him with my spiritual eyes. Well, which one of us walks outside with our physical eyes and sees an angel? And sees our guardian angel? Doesn't happen. But he was accused of denying his testimony, and who was it? The three of the apostles heard him speak in the Kirtland turmoil and lost their testimony in the Book of Mormon. Well, there's some problems with that. It's all hearsay evidence, and he just wasn't eloquent. He wasn't a religious spokesperson like Oliver was and Sidney Rigdon for the prophet Joseph Smith. He was more like a legal and negotiator
more of a
for
farmer
Joseph Smith.
And less of a school teacher like Oliver.
Okay, and Jonathan would understand this, is that we look at the testimony and the court case, and you have hearsay evidence, but usually a lawyer will try to get affidavits where people have time to make a statement, revise it, be willing to sign their name to it, and Martin was on trial for denying his testimony in a court. They would bring forth this hearsay evidence, but you have this affidavit that's in every printed copy of the Book of Mormon. That is not hearsay. That is an affidavit, and the only way for Martin to have denied his testimony, or Oliver or David,
officially would be to sign an affidavit basically rejecting or refuting.
Rejecting and asking that their name be removed from that document.
The original document, yeah.
Original document, and that it would be printed with only two of the witnesses. Now, there's another problem, too, with Martin, the claims Martin denied his testimony, is the Savior said, know ye not that it's written in your law that the testimony of two men is true. I'm not sure of the...
Two or three witnesses.
It's two or three witnesses. So if Martin denies his testimony, you still have Oliver and David not denying their testimony, so that testimony is still binding according to the laws of Israel back in, I think, the two laws of two men is true is back in the law of Moses, yep. And how they were making accusations and so forth. And then you in that trial, you would take Martin's statement, and it's in my second presentation, where he bears his final testimony. Mm-hmm. And I don't proclaim to be a lawyer or a paralegal or anything, and if Jonathan wants to correct anything, he can, but they'll usually put more weight on someone's dying words than what they said earlier in their life. And so Martin bore his testimony. I quoted verbatim in my second presentation that he knew Joseph Smith was a prophet, received the keys of the holy priesthood, he did see the angel, he did hear the voice of God. Okay, so we have the same witness that David and Oliver received, because they did hear the voice of God, because the voice of God called David Whitmer by name. And so he has nothing to gain by falsifying a testimony if he's going to be dead the next day. You know, that's the legacy and testimony he wants to leave for his family, his friends, and anyone who comes within earshot. So,
plus he knows he's going to meet his maker soon, so he wants to put it out on the table, make it nice and
then
so.
Another thing too, this is that's just things come to my mind, but this is real important that we understand Martin Harris, is that his brother joined the church. He had a Northrop Sweet was his brother-in-law. He joined the church, but Emer followed the saints, never did leave the church. But Martin's parents never joined the church. But when Martin came west, this
is later on in his life.
Later on in 1870, because he'd been gone from the church for so long, they actually rebaptized him in the Salt Lake Temple, and then he was reconfirmed and everything, and he received his endowments. But his father came to him in a dream and asked him to do his temple work. It involved a ladder. So rather than his father asking Emer to do his temple work, he waited for Martin to come back, because Martin was kind of the main person, the head of the family, even more so than Emer was, even though Emer was a faithful church member. They just had different positions. For some reason, Nathan and Rhoda Harris wanted their son Martin to do the temple work. And so he had a sister that had joined, and she was proxy for Rhoda Lapham Harris, and she Martin's mother. So,
well, listen, I sure appreciate your taking the time to come out and to share some of your knowledge with that. I want to encourage everybody to go ahead and if you're already on our streaming website, if you're a subscriber, then go ahead and just look up Kent Pickering on there, and you'll be able to find him pretty easily there, just in the search bar there. You can listen to you've got 3 so far, and then one coming up here in this coming conference here.
Yeah, my third one is not on Martin Harris. It's on Mercy, but it's on a Book of Mormon theme. So
yeah. And thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week. I hope you're enjoying our podcast. Give a thumbs up and like and subscribe to the channel there, and that help to share with other people as much as you can. And we thank you for your time.
We're also gearing up for the next Book of Mormon Virtual Expo. Go to bookofmormonevidence.org for more information.
The days ahead are sobering and challenging, and will demand the faith, prayers, and loyalty of every American. May God give us the wisdom to recognize the dangers of complacency, the threat to our freedom, and the strength to meet this danger courageously. As the ancient apostle declared, the night is far spent, the day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. Our challenge is to keep America strong and free. Strong socially, strong economically, and above all, strong spiritually, if our way of life is to endure. There is no other way.
With over 700 videos that are inspiring, you can fortify your family and friends by putting on the armor of light at bookofmormonevidencestreaming.com.